Everybody. Welcome to the third of the three-part series of Rabbi Leibtag on Mamad Har Sinai in various points in the Chumash. This morning, Parshat V'Etchanan. And like I mentioned just earlier, I hope those who were online yesterday really enjoyed what I think was a wonderfully inspiring and very informative day. Tonight, of course, Mark Shapiro will be continuing what he started last week on his book on letters to Rabbanim. We'll have Gedolim across the wide spectrum, and we'll have continuing classes all week, of course. And without further ado, Rabbi Leibtag, Mamad Har Sinai and Parshat V'Etchanan. Thank you.
Thank you. I think today's shir, I'm hoping, will be the most interesting. The reason why is because we have a repeat of the Ten Commandments in Sefer Dvarim, which we sing about on Friday night with Zachar v'Shamor. And I'm sure everyone knows that we read the Ten Commandments twice. It's twice in the Chumash. There's tiny little differences. Actually, there's some major differences in Dvarim. The goal of today's shir is to understand not only why are the Ten Commandments repeated in Sefer Dvarim, but more so, how Sefer Dvarim can help us understand the purpose and the deeper meaning of the Ten Commandments in Mamad Har Sinai. In fact, what we're going to see today, the topic of the book of Dvarim is Mamad Har Sinai. So let me begin by explaining what Sefer Dvarim is not. I'm going to do a quick review of something I hope you're familiar with. But if you ask the Jew on the street, who's gone through basic Jewish education, and ask him, what is Sefer Dvarim? The classic answer is, go ahead, Jay, give me the classic answer.
Classic answer, it's a review of the Chumash.
Okay, and of course that can't be the right answer, for a very simple reason. Because all you have to do is read Chumash and read Dvarim, and you see it's not a repeat. There's nothing from Sefer Bereshit repeated, except maybe God's name. But not even the story of Amnon and Tamar. I mean, Yehuda and Tamar. No say for his brothers, nothing is there. The story of creation, the flood, none of it's there. The story of the 10 plagues, the story of Kriyat Yamsuf, it might be mentioned, but it's not repeated. The burning bush. The first thing you have repeated in Dvarim is pretty much the story of is the 10 Commandments and what happened at Har Sinai. And we'll see why very soon. You don't have anything about the Mishkan. Most of the laws in Parshat Mishpatim are not repeated. And basically nothing, almost nothing of Breshit, and almost nothing from Breshit, and very little of Shmot, almost nothing from the laws of Vayikra, and maybe 20% of Bamidbar. And even the stories in Bamidbar are repeated, very different. And the laws of Bamidbar, almost all of them are missing, like Parah Aduma or Nazir Sot and things like that. So just, again, you can double check that yourself. That's not our topic today. What I want to clarify in the beginning is the misconception that Devarim is a repeat. And therefore, the reason why the Ten Commandments are repeated in Devarim is not because Devarim is a repeat of Chumash. Understand that? And that's critical in understanding the Ten Commandments in Devarim. The reason why the Ten Commandments are repeated in Devarim is because it's the main topic of the book. And now I want to explain why. We're going to begin the shir to understand where is Sefer Dvarim in Sefer Shmot, in the story of Mamad Har Sinai. And then we'll see why we need to understand what's happening in Sefer Shmot to appreciate what Sefer Dvarim is about. The goal of the shir is to understand Sefer Dvarim and its connection to the Ten Commandments and the Brit at Har Sinai. So we're going to begin where we left off. I'll do a real quick review. We had the 10 Commandments and the Mamad Har Sinai, the Theophany, in Parshat Yitro. That was chapter 19 and 20. That was our main source in the beginning. And then we had a parallel story in the end of Parshat Mishpatim in chapter 24, where we say Nasa v'Nishma. And last week's shir, we tried to show why the rabbis read the story in Parshat Mishpatim as happening at the same time as the story in chapter 19 in Parshat Yitro, and why it's sort of an epilogue to the whole story of Mamad Har Sinai. That was our topic last week. I'm going to return to chapter 24. In fact, we're going to go right to 24:7, because that's an easy pasuk to remember. I'm going to share my screen and go to my Tanakh, which should still be here, not my Google Calendar. We want Exodus 24. And remember good old 24:7. Moshe took the Sefer Abrit, read it out loud, and everyone said Nasa v'Nishma. Moshe took the blood and sprinkled the blood on the people. And this is the symbolic of the Brit that God made with you at Har Sinai. And then Moshe and Aaron, Nadav and Avihu go up and they see God from a distance. We talked about that last week, and that's fine. So that ends that section from verses 1 through 11 in chapter 24. That is, again, the covenant, and according to most commentators, that happened back in chapter 19. In verse 12, in Pasuk Yud Bet, everyone agrees. In fact, that's exactly what Rashi says on the spot. This is happening after the Ten Commandments. It has to be. And Pasuk Yud Bet Yud Chet, which we're going to read now, is a story of Moshe Rabbeinu going up after the Ten Commandments for the first 40 days. And let's read about it. It's very simple. Let's read Pasuk Yud Bet. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, Ale elai hara. God tells Moshe, come up the mountain, Yesham, and be there. It's not just for a day, for a while. But this is the most important pasuk for our shir today. Moshe goes up the mountain to get three things. Luchot Evan, what we call the tablets. Remember, who knows two? Two of the tablets. Shnei Luchot HaBrit, Luchot Evan. The Torah, which doesn't mean what we call the Torah. That's with a Y. That's sort of a joke. It's not, when we say Hagbo, we call it Zot HaTorah. But in Chumash, the Torah doesn't mean the Torah. When we refer to the Torah as the 5 books of Moses, that's not what Moshe is getting. He's getting a set of instructions. A Torah is a set of instructions, and the mitzvah and the commandment. Now, it's very unclear what these two things are. The Luchot Evan is crystal clear what that is. What is Torah and mitzvah that Moshe is going up to get is clearly unclear for a simple reason. Because there's probably 10 different opinions in the commentators of what that means. And if every commentator gives a different interpretation of what Torah and mitzvah are referring to, that's a proof that the pasuk is unclear. Why it's unclear, we'll talk about later. Some people say Torah Shebichtav, Torah Sheba'al Peh. Some people say Eben Esra, it's referring to the 10 Commandments, the Asseis and Lo Tasseis. Numerous different opinions. We're going to suggest something a little bit different in today's shir, which I'm writing to teach them. Then Moshe goes up and tells the people, now, Aaron Hur in charge. Moshe goes up the mountain. God's glory is on the mountain. The people see Moshe going to ball of fire. And then Pasuk Yitchet. Moshe is up on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights to receive again Luchot Evan, the Torah and the Mitzvah. Now, if Chumash was in order, what does Moshe receive? Well, the next chapter 25 is Parshat Truma, all the laws of the Mishkan. But of course, again, you probably remember from kindergarten that the laws of the Mishkan were given after Chet HaEgel. And if I follow Chazal, what Moshe goes up to get on Har Sinai in the first 40 days is the entire Torah, in addition to the 10 Commandments. Maybe everything except the Mishkan, if I follow Chazal. But what I want to do now is simply follow common sense and Chumash. Moshe goes up to get Luchot Evan, Torah and Mitzvah. What should he do when he comes down? After 40 days, he should come down and teach the people the Torah and the Mitzvah. They come together with these Luchot Evan. But when he comes down, he can't do that for a very good reason. Everyone knows why. Because Moshe should come down after 40 days and teach the Torah that God just gave them, and then they should continue on their journey to Israel. Moshe can't do that because we have a situation. What's the situation? Better known as Chet HaEgel. And because of Chet HaEgel, the whole topic of Sefer Shemot changes. And without going into details of Chet HaEgel, Moshe can't teach the laws that he received during these first 40 days because the very covenant is in question. The covenant is broken, symbolized by Moshe breaking the Luchot. God tells the people, even though I won't kill you, I'm not going with you to the land of Israel. Go on your own. I'll send a malach to take care of you, but I'm not coming with you. Moshe prays in chapter 33, please don't abandon us, come with us, because we're your people. And Moshe has to negotiate a new contract with God, called the second Luchot, which come with God's Midot HaRachamim, his attributes of mercy. And only with God's attributes of mercy will Am Yisrael be able to remain God's people, even though they're not worthy. God reaches the conclusion because of our behavior, we're stiff-necked people, we're an Am K'she'oref. And if we're an Am K'she'oref, God says, if I travel with you, I'll have to punish you right away. You won't survive. Moshe says, you have to come with us, but we want to survive. And therefore, the only way that this relationship between God and his people will remain intact, God has to change the contract and add attributes of mercy. And that's the topic of Parshat Ki Tisa. And once that agreement is reached, Moshe goes up to get the second luchot in chapter 34. When he comes down with the second luchot, what does God declare? Even though these 10 commandments are very strict, you should know that even though it says that I'm a zealous God, I'm an El Kana, I'm also an El Rachum B'Chanun, I'm a merciful God. Even though it says there, Lo Yisa, you won't take away, you won't carry away sin, God is no say Avon V'Fesha. Even though God says, Lo Yenakeh, you won't clean away sin, God says, V'Nakeh Lo Yenakeh. Famous shir on God's attributes of mercy. And that will allow God to dwell with his people and to show God that we really care and want to be his people. God doesn't bring the Shekhinah back right away. Am Yisrael has to build a Mishkan, Vasu Mikdash v'Shechanti b'tocham. Now, because of that, when Moshe comes down, he can't teach the laws that he received on the mountain. He goes up for the last set of 40 days and comes down on Yom Kippur. What should he do when he comes down on Yom Kippur? Besides teaching the laws of the Mishkan, he has to teach the people all the laws he got on Har Sinai in the first 40 days and the last 40 days. And that's exactly what happens in chapter 34. This is less known because it's the end of a very long parsha. But if you look at the end of chapter 34 and verse 27, this is after God declares his Midat Rachamim and repeats some key laws. God tells Moshe Rabbeinu to write all these things down on Mount Sinai. And we'll just read in verse 29. Vahi beredet Moshe mihar Sinai v'shnei luchot eidut biad Moshe brito min hahar Moshe lo yada ki karna or panav. Moshe is coming down with the second luchot. This is famous pasuk that Michelangelo's has Moshe Rabbeinu with horns. Misunderstanding. Quran doesn't mean that he had horns, rather his face was shining. Everyone was scared. Moshe breaks the ice with them, calls them all, and then finally in pasuk lamed bet. After Moshe breaks the ice with the leaders and the people, Moshe finally comes and meets them, coming down with the second luchot, and then he does what we would expect. What does Moshe do? Moshe commands the people everything that God told him on Har Sinai, which is what? All the laws are received on Har Sinai on the first 40 days and the last 40 days, Moshe teaches them. And then it says, Moshe would finish teaching them, he put on a mask. Maybe there was a virus. There was a famous Corona joke on these psukim. He Quran or Panav, and Moshe putting on a mask afterwards. But I don't know if you ever saw that joke, but that was the Corona Minatorah Minayin. It was Moshe putting on a mask and with Quran or Panav. That was Purim Torah way back. Now, I'm sorry getting off track. What's important for this shir, let me just summarize for those who came in late. What I'm trying to show you, and here's where we begin our shir, I need to find, where do I find these laws that Moshe teaches the people when he comes down from Har Sinai? The rest of Sefer Shemot, from chapter 35 to the end, Vayikra Pekudei, is only the laws of the Mishkan. But here we're told that Moshe taught the people everything that God commanded him on Har Sinai. On the first 40 days, the last 40 days, I have the laws of the Mishkan in Sefer Shemot, but I never find in Sefer Shemot the laws that he taught, that he received on the first 40 days. Because when he came down with the first luchot, I don't have them because we had Chata'ega, we had the sin of the golden calf. When he comes down now, indeed he teaches the laws, but we don't know what they are. We know that he taught them, we don't know their content. I don't find them in Sefer Vayikra, because Sefer Vayikra is the book about how to use the Mishkan once it's built. That's most of Vayikra. It's about how to use the Mishkan and the Korbanot and Tuman Tara. Most of the laws are from the Oha Moed. Now there's some laws in Sefer Vayikra that were given on Har Sinai, like Parshat Bahar. It could be, but it's not all the laws. We'll see very soon. And therefore, and I don't have them in Sefer Bamidbar either. What I'm looking for is the book where I find what are the laws that Moshe taught the children of Israel when he came down from Har Sinai. And that's going to be the topic of Sefer Devarim. Let me repeat that because that's the key to the shir. What I want to claim is, what is Sefer Devarim? Sefer Devarim is as simple as could be. Sefer Devarim is a speech that Moshe Rabbeinu gives, which is not a review of the 4 books of Moses that preceded it. Rather, it's a review of the laws that Moshe received on the first 40 days on Har Sinai. And to prove it, all we need to do is read Sefer Devarim. Got that? In other words, the children of Israel have heard these laws before. Moshe taught them to the first generation when he came down from Har Sinai. The reader of Chumash has never seen these laws before. And therefore, what we're going to find in Sefer Devarim, Moshe is going to teach the new generation, as they're about to enter the land of Israel, he's going to review over and over again all the laws that he first received 40 years earlier on Har Sinai. And why are they so important for the book of Devarim? Because the laws in Sefer Devarim are how to fulfill the covenant at Har Sinai on the national level. How to become a people serving God in a land as a sovereign nation. And therefore, these laws should have applied to the first generation, but because of the sin of the spies, everything was put off for 40 years, for 38 years, and they were not applicable yet. Therefore, even though the first generation was taught the laws, Chumash never tells us the laws in the books, in the earlier books. Rather, Chumash saves them for the way Moshe teaches them the last time he teaches them to the new generation in the 40th year. Once you understand that, almost everything in Sefer Devarim will make perfect sense. It'll explain all the discrepancies, the differences, and what's special about Sefer Devarim. Because we're going to find that 90% of the laws in Sefer Devarim we never had before in Chumash. And almost all the laws in Chumash beforehand we don't find in Sefer Devarim, but rather, Devarim will be a review of the laws that Moshe received on the first 40 days. Now to do that, all I need to do is read Sefer Devarim. But I can't start from the beginning, because Devarim is one of those books that if you read from the beginning, you'll be totally lost. You read the first line, these are the things that Moshe told Bnei Israel, and then we have this whole list of places, every Yarden, Midbar, Arava, and 11 days. We'll return to this verse later on, but this is the first two lines is very cryptic. And then in the 40th year, in the first day of the 11th month, Moshe is going to tell these commandments to the children of Israel after they defeat Sichon and Og. And he gives his first speech. We're going to skip the first speech, which goes from chapter 1 to chapter 5 to chapter 4. If we have time, we'll talk about it maybe a little bit later on. It's an introductory speech. In a nutshell, it's explaining to the people why it's been 40 years since these laws were first given. But let's begin now in chapter 5. Chapter 5 is the beginning of a speech that Moshe Rabbeinu delivers in Sefer Devarim. We're going now to chapter 5. And all you need to do is read it in simple Hebrew. From chapter 5, we'll see, till chapter 26 is one long, lengthy speech. And in any good speech, the first line should explain what the speech is going to be about. Remember the rules of every speech? Say what you're going to say it, and say what you said. Now, in the opening part of the speech, Moshe will explain what the speech is about. And take my word for it now, you can check it out later on. After the first phrase of verse 1, Moshe calls all of Israel together. That's the narrator of Chumash speaking. And here I need a quotation mark. And Moshe begins speaking in verse 1 with the word Shema Yisrael. The nation of Israel is gathered. Moshe gathers them together and tells them, he starts with Shema Yisrael Tachukim V'Mishpatim, and he continues talking to the end of chapter 26. If you're bored one day, read from here to chapter 26. You won't find any break in the narration. Moshe is speaking one long speech. It's a long day. Now, listen to the opening line because it's key to understanding what the speech is about. What does he tell them? Shema Yisrael, listen up, El Chukim Mishpatim, to these laws, statutes and laws that I'm commanding you today, and the most important topic for Shavuot, Ulamaretem otam ushmartam lasotam. I think this is the essence of Torah in motion. Keeping Jewish law is not only keeping law, you have to learn them and keep them. Part of Jewish law is not just keeping the laws, it's learning the laws. These are laws that have to be studied and kept. I think we'll see the whole concept of limut Torah, v'shinamtem levanecha, will be in the next chapter. But in Moshe's opening statement, I'm about to teach you a set of laws. These are laws that don't only have to be read and kept. These laws have to be studied and passed down. Now, I would expect the next line to be law number 1. But before Moshe Rabbeinu can teach the laws, he has to explain under what authority is he teaching these laws. And therefore, the next line is probably the most important. Hashem Elokeinu, karati manu brit b'chorev. Hashem, I'm going to say Hashem, our boss. You'll see why I'm saying that in a minute. He made a covenant with us at Har Sinai, meaning the laws I'm going to teach you, they're binding upon you because you entered a covenant with God on Har Sinai 40 years ago, but you have to keep these laws, and they're binding upon you because you made a covenant with God. Oh, they might say, hey, that was my parents. And therefore Moshe says, no, lo atavotenu. It wasn't only with your parents that God made that brit, because everyone is part of that brit. And that's the concept of Sayu at Sinai. Moshe Rabbeinu is here saying, the brit between God and a people in in Parsha Yitro, in chapter 19, that brit that God made wasn't a brit between God and that generation. It was a brit between God and a people. It began with the first generation, but that brit is multi-generational. It's an eternal brit between God and the people. And as long as we remain God's people, that brit is binding upon us. Then we get to the topic, which we talked about in our first share. How did God speak to you and make the covenant in Har Sinai? Panim b'fanim, diber Hashem yimechem b'ar mitoch ha'esh. God spoke to you directly, face to face. We talked about that plan B. That was a high level. But maybe that was the original plan. What happened instead? Onochi omeid ben Hashem u'benechem beitahi. I became the middleman between you and God at that time. La'gid lechem et dvar Hashem, to tell you the words of God. Ki yareita b'pnei eish v'lo litam b'har lemor. You were fearful. Remember we saw the story how they chickened out. They became fearful. And you didn't come up the mountain. Maybe you should have, but you didn't. You stood at a distance, and I taught you the rest of the laws. Now, there's an argument. Is Pasuk Daled, Panim B'Fanim, the first 2, and Pasuk Hey, the last 8? Is Panim B'Fanim the first 10, and Pasuk Hey, everything that follows, the 10 Commandments? Or is Pasuk Daled God's original plan, which never happened, and Pasuk Hey is how we received the 10 Commandments? Again, that would be, we discussed that in our first year with Plan A and Plan B, and the dialectic at Har Sinai, how close we are to God, and how you have to look to God, look for God to find Him. But again, that was our topic in our first year. What's important for me today is this is the introduction to the speech. Now, what does Moshe Rabbeinu do now? Because he said that Hashem our God made a brit with us at Har Sinai, that brit, to be this nation serving God, was formalized with the 10 Commandments, or we call the 10 Statements, and therefore, in that context, he's quoting the 10 Commandments. He's not quoting the 10 Commandments as part of a review of Chumash. He doesn't tell the story of Mamad Har Sinai, of Plan A and Plan B and all that. Instead, he says, these are the laws of the covenant that you made with God at Har Sinai. And this you heard more directly from God than everything else. And he makes some small changes. That's not our topic for now. Why the small changes? It's the same basic idea. Then we're told, these words that God spoke to you, Moshe wrote them down, these 10 statements, on Luchot Avanim. Remember, Moshe received Luchot Avanim. And then, what happened? Listen carefully. When you heard God speak to you, and you heard the mountain burning, and you got very scared. You came in front of me, all your leaders came, and you said, Moshe, we're believers. We heard God's voice. We believe that God is great, and we know that God can speak to man, but any more of this, we're going to die from this great fire. If we continue to hear the words of God, because what mortal could possibly be so close to God and stay alive? Instead, Moshe Rabbeinu, Kravata Ushma, you go up. You're a superhuman. You're Moshe Rabbeinu. You're an Ish Elokim. You go up and tell everything that God says. Tell us everything that God says. And when you come down and speak to us, listen to Pasuk Chav Gimel carefully. In some of your Tanachim, this will be Pasuk Chav Daled. There's a different there's a different way to count the Psukim, depending on how you count the verses in the 10 Commandments. So in your talk, this might be Chav Daled. But again, we're in chapter 5, verse 23 here, or verse 24. What does Moshe say? What does the people tell Moshe Rabbeinu? Listen carefully. Moshe, you go up and listen to everything that God's going to command us. See that phrase again, Hashem Elokeinu. And here's the big line, V'shamanu v'asinu. Remember we had Nasa v'nishma, to what God was going to say? Now, after the 10 Commandments, the people say Nasa v'nishma, not to what God's going to say, but to what Moshe is going to tell them that God said. And now Moshe Rabbeinu becomes the liaison between God and the people. Again, that was probably God's original plan. We'll see in a minute, because God likes this idea. But Am Yisrael is saying, Naseh v'nishma, to anything that God says, that anything that Moshe tells them, that God said to him on Mount Sinai. And this is the acceptance, this is the principle of the Rambam, that when we believe in the prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu, we're saying, when Moshe Rabbeinu comes down and tells us these laws, he's not making it up. It's not that Moshe was given the right to legislate by God, and Moshe makes up the laws. No, every law that Moshe teaches, he's simply repeating what God called him on Mount Sinai. Moshe might explain the laws in Sefer Dvarim, but the laws themselves are divine, they're from God, and Am Yisrael should have heard them from God. They were scared, and therefore they accepted whatever Moshe says in God's name, they'll accept and keep. God heard this request and said, oh, what a great idea. Remember, they should always fear me so much. And now listen carefully to the key of the entire book. This is after the Ten Commandments for sure. And God tells Moshe, go tell the people, go back to your tents. And that's why the Ramban proves that this is not the same story we had in Shemot where the people became scared and stood at a distance. This is a different story. This is what God tells Moshe to tell the people, go back to your tents and you stay here with me for a long time. God tells Moshe, you stay here with me. I'm going to speak to you et kol ha-mitzvah v'chukim ha-mishpatim. God tells Moshe, you stay with me on Har Sinai. I'm going to speak to you the entire mitzvah. We'll talk about what the word means. Ha-mitzvah and the chukim ha-mishpatim. Asher tilamdein, that you must teach them. V'asu ba'aretz asher anochi noten lam l'rishta. I have a set of laws that come part and parcel with the Ten Commandments. There are a set of laws. There'll be structure to them and a purpose of them. And these laws are to be kept in the land of Israel. They're not only laws that relate to the land of Israel as far as like planting and agricultural laws. They're laws about how to become a nation in the land of Israel. It's not the land of what's called mitzvot hatulot ba'aretz, like Trumot and Masrot. This is laws about establishing a government in the land of Israel, establishing an economic policy in the land of Israel, having an army, and when you go to war and who goes to war. Laws about a judicial system. The laws of how to take a people, a nation of slaves, just freed from Egypt, and how to turn them into a nation representing God, that's going to take a detailed plan. And those would be the laws of Sefer Dvarim, a set of laws that makes us a nation serving God. And then Moshe says, these are the laws, you have to keep them and follow everything God's saying in order to live for a long time on the land. Again, Moshe, before he teaches the laws, is telling the people, you made a brit with God in Har Sinai, you had the Ten Commandments you heard from God, and then you begged me to teach you the rest of the laws, and these are the laws that God gave me to teach you. What's my proof? Just look at the next line, the beginning of chapter 6. Chapter 6 is what we just saw, but now it's explicit. What's coming up now, Moshe says? V'zot ha-mitzvah v'chukim ha-mishpatim. What's coming up in this book? The mitzvah, we'll see what that word means in a minute. The commandment, what I want to claim is, ha-mitzvah is hey idea, like the, a definitive the. It's all commandments are created equal, but some are more equal than others. There'll be one mitzvah which supersedes all the mitzvot. Ha-mitzvah, we'll see, it will be loving God and fearing God. It's what we call when we say Shema every day. There's the mitzvah, the most important mitzvah, which is the essence of the covenant. It's a way of life. In addition to the mitzvah, there'll be also statutes and laws, chukim mishpatim, which God commanded me to teach you. Again, what's coming up in this speech, Moshe says? What I'm about to teach you, we'll have two sections, the mitzvah and the chukim mishpatim, which God is commanding, Hashem, your God, is commanding me to teach you, to keep in the land that you're going to inherit. Why should you keep them? In order that you learn to fear God and keep all of his laws that I'm commanding you, you and your children and your grandchildren, forever. And not that you as an individual should live, but you as a nation and people will stay in your land for a long time. We'll see. Arichut Yamim in Devarim is in contrast to exile. Arichut Yamim in Devarim is the nation of Israel living for a long time and staying in their land as opposed to going into exile and punishment. And then V'shamarta Israel, keep all these laws. They're good for you. And you'll multiply if you keep them, as God promised your forefathers, in a land flowing with milk and honey. That's the end of the introduction. Don't close your eyes, but look at the next line. The famous Shema Yisrael that we all know by heart, and we see every day, is the beginning of the laws that Moshe received together with the Ten Commandments. Let me explain how important this is. You might remember an ancient custom that in davening, they used to say not only Shema every day, in fact, the Beit HaMikdash, they would say Shema Yisrael every day and the Ten Commandments. But we stopped saying the Ten Commandments because people thought only those are from God, and therefore they were so important that they took them out of davening, so it shouldn't become too important. Rabbi, I'm going to give you that share one day about how the Ten Commandments, why they're not in the Siddur. But what remains in the Siddur, not just a pasuk of Shema Yisrael. Shema Yisrael is Moshe Rabbeinu, after giving this introduction, is about to begin the laws. He's about to begin the Ha-Mitzvah section. And I'll show you in a minute the commandment, which is the most important commandment, is Avat Hashem. Only makes sense. A covenantal relationship, the most important thing is not just the covenant, the technical contract, but the feeling, the love, and the desire to be a member of that contract. That's why Chazal compared it to a marriage. But before he begins, he wakes them up. Shema Yisrael again. That's his opening line several times. Remember, he began in verse 5, in chapter 5. Hashem Elokeinu krati manu brit b'chorev. Hashem, our God, made a brit with us. Who is this God? Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem, our boss, who made a brit. He's not only our God, he's everyone's God. He's the only God, Hashem Echad. And this double statement is key to Judaism. What are we saying? It's called Kabbalat Malchut Shamayim. It's accepting the yoke of heaven, meaning we need to recognize, even though he's our boss and we're commanded to be his people, the God that we're representing is everyone's God. Hashem Elokeinu doesn't mean he's our God and no one else's God. He's saying he's our boss, we work for him, but the God that we're working for and we represent, he's the one and only God. It's not that we have our God, they have their gods. Chumash is not accepting there could be every nation has their God, the national God, but rather there's one God, Hashem Echad, but we as God's people were chosen by God to represent him. Just like Shabbat was separated from the other days of the week to be the liaison, to be the funnel that brings God into every day of the week. And just like the Levites are separated and given Kedusha to teach Torah to the other 11 tribes, God separates one nation, gives them a special status, but the purpose of that separation is for the sake of all the nations. And therefore, the most important point we have to emphasize every day is not our belief that God exists, that we take for granted. Of course, God exists. That's a different topic. But the key understanding that we have to say every day when we say Shema is not the existence of God, but rather the understanding that we're chosen to serve him. What the rabbis call accepting the yoke of heaven, Kabbalat Malchut Shamayim. An O is a yoke that the farmer puts on a ox to plow the field. Accepting the yoke means accepting the responsibility to work for God, which is followed by what your attitude needs to be. Ideally, how should you serve God? Through love. Love God with all your heart. It's giving 100%. Now, in addition to attitude and love, you also have to follow a set of laws. There's halachot you have to keep. What's that referring to? That's the laws of Sefer Devarim. The Devarim, which was introduced in the beginning of the book. These laws I'm about to teach you. Remember this phrase, Hayom? All these words are the mitzvah and chukim mishpatim. All these words and laws and rebuke that Moshe is teaching you today, all on this day, remember in the 40th year, all these laws, keep them on your heart. And not only you have to keep them, vishinantam levanecha. That doesn't mean you teach them. Don't look at that English translation. I think it's a mistake. That the teacher's lamed. Shinun is to repeat. Listen carefully. The laws of Sefer Devarim are not just laws you have to learn. These are laws that require constant repetition. Remember, there's lots of laws. I don't need to know and by rote and repeat the laws of Tzarat every day and the laws of Sefer Vayikra about how to bring korbanot. But the laws of Sefer Devarim, the laws coming up in the speech, they need constant repetition. And what do you call a set of laws that needs constant repetition? Mishneh Torah. Mishnah means to repeat, l'shanim, over and over again. And why is Devarim called Mishneh Torah? It'll be called that later in the Mitzvah of the King. It's not because it's a repeat of the first 4 books of Chumash. Rather, it's a set of laws that needs constant repetition. And these Devarim that I'm teaching you today, you need to learn them by rote and repeat them all the time. And talk about them when? They surround you 24/7. And then you break them in your tefillin, remember? And put them on your doorposts. In other words, these laws guide your day-to-day life. And that's what's special about the laws in Devarim. These are the laws, the most practical laws of day-to-day life as God's people. And these laws require constant repetition. That's his introduction. And before I go any farther, just to prove my point, that again, this begins, its speech, it goes all the way to chapter 26. It comes with the 10 Commandments. Look how the speech is going to end. At the end of chapter 26. Remember, these things I'm teaching you today, Al Bavecha, and includes Mitzvah and Chukim Mishpatim. I'm going to skip to the end of chapter 26. Remember that day that Moshe was talking about? The end of the speech is very simple. Hayom hazeh, It's been a long day since chapter 5. Even though I'm teaching the laws, these are God's laws. Hashem Elokecha mitzavcha lasot. Hashem, your God. Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. He's commanded you keep these laws. I'm just telling you the laws at these chukim and mishpatim. How do you have to keep these laws? With all your heart, with all your soul. That's the two parts of the speech. The attitude, the hamitzvah, and the chukim mishpatim. Keep the laws with the right attitude. And then we go back and repeat, we sort of renew the vows of Har Sinai. And this takes us right back to chapter 19 in Shemot. What did you take upon yourselves? Et Hashem Emart Hayom, you, the nation of Israel, took upon yourselves today that He'll be your God. That was Brit Milah we talked about in Brit Sinai. L'lechem b'drachav, that's doing Mishpat and Tzedakah, the story in Sefer Breshit. This is Breshit chapter 17, Breshit chapter 18. Everyone was chosen, L'lechem b'drachav Hashem, to do Mishpat and Tzedakah, to keep all of His laws, to follow halacha, and to obey Him in any commandment He gives you. What did God take upon Himself? Hashem Emir Hayom. God appointed you today. God took upon Himself today that you'll be for Him His Am Skula, like He told you at Har Sinai, to keep all of His laws, and to put you in a leadership position above the other nations. For what purpose? L'tila Shem Tiferet, for God's reputation, name, and glory. By our keeping these laws, that will make God look good. That's how we represent Him. U'liyatcha Am Kadosh, keeping these laws will make us an Am Kadosh. L'Hashem Elochech Kasher Diber, back at Har Sinai. You understand what Moshe is referring to? Let me stop this, Sharon, to show you. Just repeat this from what we've seen before. Let's go to our Adobe. But we talked about the outline of the speech in Devarim. So Moshe begins the speech in chapter 5, how we receive these laws. Chapter 6 to 11, we'll see it's the mitzvah section, loving God and fearing God. It's from Shema Tavayim Shema, we say every day. We'll see chapters 12 to 26 of the Chukim Mishpatim section, the laws that will establish us as God's nation. Now, the speech began with Shema Yisrael Chukim Mishpatim, and we just read the ending. Before I read the ending, I want to go back to the first shir we gave. On the first shir, we talked about before we receive the 10 Commandments, the contract, we enter this contract by accepting a proposition from God. What was God's proposition? Remember, before we accept to be God's people, God says, look what I did for you. And now, Im Shemo Tishmo B'Koli, will you obey me and keep my brit? Brit Sinai, the new brit. And you'll be my skula mikol amim, kili kol haaretz. If you keep that, atem tulim mamlechet kohanim v'goy kadosh. And in light of that, we got the 10 Commandments. Look how that's echoed in the grand finale. This day, God's commanding you to keep all these laws, keep them with the right attitude. You took upon yourself that He'll be your God. You'll follow His ways, keep His laws. God took upon Himself that you'll be His Am Skula, as we said before, Kasher Diber Har Sinai, to keep all the laws, and to put you in leadership position for God's glory and name and reputation, and that will make an Am Kadosh. So what I want to claim is the very concept of Brit Sinai, which is our first year in chapter 19, accepting our acceptance of God to be our boss and to serve Him as a nation. Remember, a priestly nation, not a nation that everyone's a priest, but rather a priestly nation, a sovereign nation that's going to represent God to the other nations, a nation separated from the other nations to serve Him. Our contract will be the 10 statements, or what we call the 10 Commandments. But the laws to apply that and make that happen are the laws in Sefer Devarim. How we become a nation serving God. Keep the laws of Devarim properly, and we'll make God's name great. Then after chapter 26, we're going to have the Tochachot. If you keep the laws, I'll reward you. Life will be good. Don't keep the laws, boy, you'll be in big trouble. And therefore, that's my key point of the share, is that the laws in Sefer Devarim are simply part and parcel with the 10 Commandments. The speech that Moshe is giving from chapter 5 to 26 are the laws that he received on the first 40 days that come part and parcel with the 10 Commandments. They should have been implemented right away. Had we not sinned with Chet Egel, we would have received these laws of Sefer Devarim and continued right to Israel. There would be no need to build a temporary temple, the Mishkan, because we didn't have that. We didn't break the brit with Chet Egel, and that's why Sefer Devarim doesn't say a word about the Mishkan, because the laws in Devarim are a reflection of what Moshe receives on the first 40 days. That's the ideal. What do we have in Sefer Devarim? Not a Mishkan, but a Mikdash. Hamakom asher yivchar Hashem l'shakein shmo sham. We'll see very soon in chapter 12 one of the biggest themes in the book will be when we become a nation, we have to have a central capital city, a hub. Where it'll be, we'll have to choose. God will help us choose the place. We have to look for it. Later it becomes Yerushalayim, but the place is described by its function. The place that God's going to choose to make his name known. And that explains why, why the Ten Commandments are repeated in the Devarim. It's not part of a review of all the first 4 books of Chumash. It's very different. It's the book which applies the concept of the Ten Commandments, of our covenant to be God's people, how to make that happen as a nation in the land of Israel, as a people. And I'll just give you a couple quick examples. Now, before we go any farther, I want to go over what we say every day in Shema. The connection between Shema and the Ten Commandments makes a lot of sense now. And that's why we fulfill this commandment of Vishnantam Levanecha by reading the bookends of the Mitzvah section. The Mitzvah section is the right attitude, loving God and fearing God. That's the key of the covenant. But it won't work unless you keep halacha, which would be the chukim and mishpatim. The balance between your attitude, what's called machshava or hashkafa, which is part of Jewish learning, and keeping halacha, which is chapters 12 to 26. That's a balance that we have in every Jewish education system. We have to teach loving God and fearing God, and that's called, I guess, Hasidut more. And then keeping halacha, we'll call that misnagdim. And we need the balance between the two. Now, I want to give a quick example of how these laws apply the Ten Commandments. First, a word about the Ten Commandments, which I don't think we have talked about themselves. The way I view them, they're 10 statements. And what were the 10 statements? The first statement is, I'm your boss. Not that I exist, but rather, God's existence is taken for granted. We believe that that was the process of coming out of Egypt. Assuming that we believe in God, we need to understand there's a purpose of why God took us out of Egypt. I'm the God who took you out of Egypt to be your boss. That's Hashem Elokeinu. He's the one who took us out of Egypt to be his people. And therefore, the next commandment is, I'm your boss, and you can't work for anyone else. In fact, almost any contract you'll find anywhere begins with who are the two parties. We define the two parties and the relationship between them. Who are the two parties? I'm the God who took you out of Egypt. I'm the one and only God. I took you out of Egypt. I'm your boss. And most important, you can't work for anyone else. No moonlighting. You're exclusive for me. If you follow me, I'll reward you. If you don't follow me and you work for another God, well, you're in big trouble. I'm a zealous God. I'll punish you, etc. Then we're told, don't carry God's name in vain. You're chosen to make God's name known. That's not just a technical thing. You can't curse God when you're missing a foul shot or something. But not carrying God's name in vain means you're chosen to carry God's name, to make his reputation known. Don't do a lousy job. What we call, don't do a chilo Hashem. Now, we need to remember this every week, and that's Shabbat. Why is Shabbat in the contract? Because Shabbat is an oath brit, isn't it? We had that in Parshat Kitisa. Shabbat is an oti la'olam. And therefore, the Ten Commandments include Shabbat because Shabbat is covenantal, because it's the reminder of the covenant in Har Sinai. And it's a reminder that we're chosen to serve God. And just like God picked one day of the week and made it special, God picked one nation out of 70 and made it special to serve God. Therefore, it's in the covenant. Honoring tradition, honoring our parents, is necessary for the covenant to remain eternal. The idea of teaching this to your children and the need for parents to teach their children to respect tradition and respect their parents. You know, honoring parents is not just a commandment on the children, it's also a commandment on the parents to teach the children to respect tradition. That's covenantal because it keeps the covenant going forever. It's critical, it's cardinal to the covenant. The last 5, I think, is really 1. Because not to kill or not to steal or not to an adultery and swearing falsely, that is universal. Every nation has to keep those laws. God wants everyone to keep them. But you're my people, don't even think about it. That's called lo tachmod. If you understand what I mean by that. Lo tachmod means don't even think about it. It's called preventive medicine. Because when you find murder and stealing and adultery and swearing falsely, it doesn't begin with that. It always begins with wanting something that's not yours. And probably the second half of the Ten Commandments is a principle of a way of life of Judaism. When something's important to you, you prevent it. It's called preventive medicine, what I call don't even think about it. And lo tachmod, maybe it's too much to ask from all nations. As God's people, It's so important to us, we don't even think about it, because we of all people could never dream of doing murder or adultery or stealing or swearing falsely and things like that. Those God wants all mankind to keep, but we as God's special nation have to be a light to the other nations, and therefore, to make sure we don't act that way, we don't even think about it. I mean, that's a little review of the Ten Commandments. Let's go back now to Sefer Dvarim, and I want to show you some examples of what happened, of these laws. So I go back in Sefer Dvarim, and let's simply go back to the beginning of the book to prove my first point. Pictures there. Before the speech begins, this is the introduction to the book. What's coming up, Elad Dvarim, remember? The Dvarim is referring to the speech. This is how Ibn Ezra and Ramban explained the book. What's coming up in this book are the laws, or the speech, the words, the Moshe taught Bnei Israel, numerous times. Now listen carefully. The laws of Sefer Dvarim, Moshe first received them on Har Sinai. He taught them to the first generation when he came down with the second Luchot. But because these laws have to be kept as we enter the land of Israel and establish a nation, and these laws in constant repetition, Moshe is going to repeat these laws over and over and over again. It's Mishneh Torah. It's laws that need constant repetition. Therefore, we're told, how many times has Moshe given this speech? He gave the speech now in Iver Yarden. That's where the speech is now. He also gave them back in the Midbar. He gave them in the Arava, Mosuf, wherever that was in the Sinai. Between Paran and Tofel, he gave the speech. In Laban and Chatzirot, basically Moshe gave the speech numerous times, and especially on the 11-day journey from Har Sinai to Kadesh Barnea. In Kadesh Barnea is where Moshe sent the spies in the first year. And from Kadesh Barnea, we should have entered the land of Israel. That was an 11-day journey. What did we do on that 11-day journey from Har Sinai to Kadesh Barnea, which should have been the journey as we're about to enter the land of Israel? Moshe taught the laws of Sefer Dvarim over and over again. They were drilled over and over again because those are the laws that are going to make us God's nation. Now, why didn't we keep them? That's chapter 1 in the story. That's why Moshe begins the first speech with the story of the spies. His first speech is about what went wrong, why the first generation didn't make it, and why these laws were no longer applicable to the first generation, and why they're now applicable to the new one. And therefore, in the 40th year, in the 11th month, God tells Moshe to teach these laws one last time to the new generation. After we began our conquest, we defeated Sichon and Og, which is a sign that God's with us. And therefore, in Ever Yarden, in the land of Moab, Moshe is going to begin teaching this Torah, these laws, to the people. And then this is opening speech where he explains why it's been 40 years, mostly the story of the spies, and then how God indeed is begin the conquest. And then if I go quickly to the end of the speech in verse 4, mostly what they call the historical speech, it's really a pep talk. So they should become free. Then he tells them, Batay Yisrael, follow these chuk mishpatim I'm about to teach you today. So in order that you live and keep them and be worthy of conquering the land, don't add to them, don't take off. You know that God punishes, and listen carefully. In the introduction to the speech, in chapter 4, Moshe tells them, pay attention, I'm teaching you today, chukim mishpatim, which God is commanding me to teach you, to keep in the land you're going to inherit. This is the introduction to the laws of Dvarim. And then make sure to keep them and do them, because it's your wisdom in the eyes of the nations. When they hear and see you keeping these laws, they'll say, whoa, what a wise and important nation this great nation is. Ki mi goy gadol, where do we find a nation that's so close to God, like Hashem, our God or our boss, every time we turn to him? Umi goy gadol, where do we find a nation that has such just and upright laws, like this Torah that I'm teaching you today? Remember how we began our shir? What does Moshe Rabbeinu go up to receive? 3 things. Luchot Even, Torah, and Mitzvah. Here we have a definition of what the word Torah means. This Torah that Moshe is going to teach in Sefer Dvarim, what does it include? It includes Chukim u'Mishpatim. A Torah is a set of procedural law. Earlier in Chumash Torah, there's a way to bring a Korban Chatat, Zot Torah Chatat, Zot Torah Olah. There's a Torah for the Sotah, Zot K'noot. There's a Torah for the Metzorah. There's any procedural law of how to accomplish something in Vayikra and Bamidbar is called a Torah. We have it over and over again. Now I'm going to have a Torah of how to fulfill to become a Mamlechet Kohanim V'Goy Kadosh. In other words, the laws in Sefer Dvarim are going to be a type of a Torah because it'll be a set of procedures, a set of laws that we keep that have a goal to become a nation representing God. And therefore, here we see Chokim Mishpatim is referring to the Torah. The HaMitzvah, I said, is the most important commandment, which is keeping God's laws, loving God and fearing God, having the right attitude. And therefore, when Moshe goes up to get Luchot Even, Torah Mitzvah, in essence, what's he going up to get? He's going up to get the Luchot Even, the contract, and the Mitzvah section, loving God and fearing God, and the Chukim Mishpatim, the laws we have to keep to become God's people in the land. Now, this is important for Shavuot. This is the Rambam makes a big deal about this. Be careful and make sure never to forget what happened at Har Sinai. Don't forget the day that you stood in front of God when God told me, gather the nation together and I'll tell them my words, which you have to learn to fear God all the days on your life. And then Moshe tells the story, you came to me under the mountain and you got scared and God spoke to you from the fire. You heard God, but you didn't see God. And then God told you his brit, which he commanded you, the 10 Devarim, Aseret Devarim, and wrote them on 2 tablets of stone. And then Votitziva, God commanded me at that time to teach you Chukim Mishpatim, to keep them in the land, which you're now going to conquer, and make sure to keep them. You understand? This is the introduction to the speech. He goes on and on in the speech, and now don't stand up, but look at the introduction to the speech. The first speech is over in verse 40, and now look in verse 44. This is the narrator of Devarim coming back, introducing the speech from chapter 5 to 26. What's coming up? V'zot haTorah asher sam Moshe livnei bnei Yisrael. What's coming up in the speech? The Torah that Moshe is teaching bnei Yisrael, which includes edot, or warnings, and musar, and chukim mishpatim, which God spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu when they left Egypt. That was 40 years ago. And now in Ivri Yarden, Moshe is teaching them one last time after we conquer. And then the speech begins in chapter 5. And when the speech is over, we're going to see there's a commandment in chapter 27. What is Moshe told to do? Considering that the whole book is the Torah, what do we have? I'll give you a source sheet that has all this later on. Moshe commands him when the speech is over. Remember, speech ended in chapter 26. Now we're in chapter 27. God tells Moshe, write down all these words of this Torah on big stones and write them in Harival. And when you cross the Jordan, put up these stones on Harival. And you build a mizbeach just like at Har Sinai, and then you write on these stones and Kol Divrei Torah Be'eretev. In other words, when we come into Israel, we're going to have a big learn-a-thon on Harival. We're going to repeat them, and then finally, the last mitzvah of Devarim will be Hakel, where we go to the Beit HaMikdash and read the Torah, which are the laws of Devarim, every 7 years at the end of the Shemitah cycle. Now, my time's almost up, so let me get to some key points. So let me go back to how we began. My point was, when Moshe goes up at the end of Parshat Mishpatim to receive the 10 commandments in the Torah and the Mitzvah, what is he going to get? He's going to get the Luchot Even, which is the contract, and 2 sections of laws, the Mitzvah section, which is attitude, and the Torah, which is the laws of Sefer Devarim, which are how to become God's nation. Now, the Mitzvah section, look how it ends. It ends beautifully with the second parsha of Kriyat Shema. With if you follow my laws, and then listen carefully. This is the end of the mitzvah section. Kim shemor tishmor kol mitzvah zot. If you keep this whole attitude section, which I'm commanding you today, which is to do what? To love God and fear God, then God will help you conquer your enemies. Wherever you go, I'll help you conquer. Say for Yoshua. And then give you a blessing and a curse if you follow me. A blessing, don't follow me. You'll be cursed. And then because God's bringing you to this land, God's bringing you to land to come to inherit it. And therefore, ushmartem lasot, when you come to land, keep these chukim mishpatim, which I'm commanding you today. And then good old chapter 12 begins the chukim mishpatim. We have the law. The first law will be about establishing a center. Remember? Hamakom HaShevcha Hashem is a big topic in chapter 12. Then we have laws about our economic system of giving Truma and Maser, Aser Taser. Then we have the Shemitah. We have an economic system. Every 7 years we annul our debts. Then we have to make sure we frequent this Hamakom HaShevcha Hashem on the Sholosh Regalim, chapter 16. Then we have setting up Parshat Shoftim, a judicial system in everywhere. Then we have our Supreme Court. We have laws about our leadership, how a king the need for a king or a central government and how the king has to behave. Laws about Nevi'im, laws about Kohanim and Levi'im, laws about going to war, who goes to war, when we go to war, and the laws about our marketplace, cities of refuge we're going to set up, laws about borders, we're going to have a set of laws that are going to establish us as a nation, and the book goes on in Parshat Kiteitzei, to be laws about social justice, marriage laws, Yibum laws and things like that, divorce laws, and laws about how we act in our marketplace and make sure that the poor and the needy are always taken care of. And the final law will be good old Bikurim. Again, that's a more detailed law in Sefer Dvarim, but I'm going to send you a source sheet. I'll show you what I'm going to send you in a minute. Is that in Sefer Dvarim, we had the Ten Commandments and why we say Shema, but also the word Torah in Sefer Dvarim. This was a shir from Perach Avdalad. I'll send you this that we did in the beginning. And the word Torah in Sefer Dvarim that we just did, how the word Torah is referring to laws in Sefer Dvarim that Moshe is teaching over and over again. So in a nutshell, let me just summarize. Again, these will come out later on. What I want to summarize is following. That when we read Sefer Dvarim, we're reading a book, which is the main book of Ma'amad Har Sinai. It's not just, we entered a contract. This is how to take a concept and make it real, make it happen. How to apply that in real time in day-to-day life. That's going to be key to becoming God's people. And that contract comes with a set of practical laws which do with your attitude in setting up a country. And that those laws need constant repetition. They surround us 24/7. They have to be studied and taught. We'll see these laws are not just laws, they're principles that the rabbis study and apply. As Moshe teaches these laws for the last time, he's taught these laws over and over again. The last time he teaches them, what does he do? He adds rebuke. The laws are 40 years old. The rebuke is 40 is brand new, meaning these laws have been taught many times by Moshe Rabbeinu. Chumash prefers to record them the last time they're taught, because as Moshe teaches them in Sefer Dvarim, what does he add? He adds, remember what God did to Miriam, remember how you rebelled against God, remember this, remember that. Maybe we'll add some explanations. The last time Moshe teaches these laws, they'll include explanations and rebuke and application, and they'll make it much more relevant. And that's what's so beautiful about Sefer Dvarim. And therefore, whenever we're going to find a discrepancy, there'll be always a good reason for it. Again, we can spend another couple hours studying Sefer Dvarim and all the differences and how this approach solves almost every single one of them. But the key thing, which I want to end with, is that especially how this relates to things nowadays. One of the core themes of Har Sinai is not just, we're God's people. It's a privilege. God takes special care of you. We took on a responsibility to be God's people forever. But we serve God not only by our individual behavior, we serve God by our national behavior. We were talking before the share began about how we're viewed as a community. When other nations see us acting, it's not, sometimes they don't just see an individual Jew, they see a Jewish community, they'll see a Jewish state. And having a Jewish community and state is a tremendous potential to sanctify God if that community and state are acting properly. It's a tremendous opportunity, unfortunate opportunity, to desecrate God's name when they're acting poorly. But the core concept that we serve God as a nation, as a people, which again, it begins with the individual, goes to the family, to the community, and ultimately to the nation. It's a tremendous opportunity that we have to be worthy of. And in the last 53 years, whatever, we have Jerusalem, and in the last 70-some years, we have a Jewish state. We've turned our country over the last 100 years. After 2,000 years of not being able to fulfill these laws of Sefer Dvarim, we have a 2,000-year break in Jewish law and custom of halakha of how to paskin laws, how to follow Jewish law on a national level, how a Jewish army is supposed to behave, how a Jewish police force is going to behave, how do you run an economic system, being a Jewish country. We know how to keep kosher. We know how to keep Tarat HaMishpacha. We've been keeping Shabbat for 2,000 years, for 4,000 years straight. We have a halachic tradition. The ideas of being a Jewish people serving God, we had a break of some 2,000 years, and that's one of the biggest challenges facing us today. And therefore, when we study Ma'amad Har Sinai, it's important to understand what are the core concepts of Matan Torah, not just what are our privileges, what's our responsibilities, and what's its purpose. And the idea that it's not just a Jew serves God in an individual behavior, we serve God in a national behavior, how to apply that in real-time challenging situations when we have a Jewish state and not everyone's perfect, and we have Jewish people who break the law and things without getting into modern day politics. As how we act as a nation, that has to be important as we guide ourselves through our lives. So with that, we leave with a blessing that we can take our Torah study, which have almost nothing else to do during these interesting times, and we can dedicate this time that we're in quarantine and things like that to Torah study, and hopefully be able to apply the Torah that we're learning in a much better way when things go back to normal. And thank you, Rabbi Kalman, for organizing this series. And
Thank you.
Hope I didn't do too much, cover a lot of material today, but again, I'll send
No,
the
we
sources.
look forward to more. I thought you might address some of the differences in the first and the second Luchot. That's a whole other shiur, of course.
Oh, that's another 3-part series.
Right. Okay. All right. We can talk about that afterwards. But
Okay.
thank you very much.